I think one of the major issues that people have when they're trying to discern what the image of God is there's a linguistic issue, and that's that there's a number of different words that get used to talk about the image of God, and one of the things that happens is in Genesis 1:26, God says, "Let us make human beings in our likeness." Likeness is the way it gets translated, and it really does mean something like resemblance, right? Let's make it so that human beings resemble us, and a lot of hay gets made out of this. Well, how do we resemble God? My caution to those of you who then immediately want to jump to some characteristic, some attribute, and there are many of you, and you're not alone. The Christian tradition is replete, it is rife with this kind of thinking, and it's not bad thinking, but I worry that it's not textual. Really great theology has to begin with a very close reading of the text. Everything starts with a close reading of the text. And if you look at Genesis 1:26, I mean, literally right after, it says, "Let us make human beings in our resemblance, our likeness." What's the next thing? "And let them rule." I mean, it's right there. "And let them rule." To say that there's no connection between those things strikes me as just not reading with the grain of the text. The text is talking about let's have human beings in an image, and then as a result of that, because they're in God's image, let them rule. I think that this strongly indicates that however we think about the image of God, it needs to be missional, and it needs to deal with human beings' responsibility for the created order and for setting up government and society and culture that images, that looks like, that resembles the kind of rule that God in God's self, in God's heavenly kingdom, and in the creation of the world that God has demonstrated. If we get away from this thinking, again, and I'm going to harp on it over and over, we are in danger of taking the thing that we like most about humanity, human life, human culture, theology, whatever, and making that the image of God. Because there's no other textual place to go. Like, if you're just going to try and derive your notion of the image of God from the text and the text alone, sola scriptura, right? If that's what you're going to do, Scripture alone, only the Bible, only the text, you absolutely have to connect the image of God with human cultivation of the created order. They are right there, butting up against each other in Genesis 1:26. And then right after that, we get male and female, and we get a command to go do things. And then after this, the so-called curse, what do we find out? We find out that the mission of human beings has been made more difficult because of the curse. We have Eve now struggling mightily in childbearing. We have Adam now wrestling with the ground. There has been this throughout the constructed, Genesis 2-3, 1-3. There has been this narrative movement of human beings being given this mission because they're like God, and God has this mission in His own rule and governance over the created order. Human beings have to go and extend that. And it gets frustrated because of what happens in the garden and sin and whatnot. But it very, very much seems that at a textual level, the image of God is closely related to vocation, to mission, to what we're called to do. Not, intellect, emotion, relationality, communion with divine, all the various things that we think are important about human life and God. That is not what God does. That is not what the text says. Now, I will grant you that the grammar does not compel my reading. So if you look in the Common English Bible, the Common English Bible renders the Hebrew as something like, "Let us make human beings in our resemblance, so that they may, rule." That's not actually in the Hebrew. It's just a conjunction. But boy, it's suggestive, isn't it? And doesn't it make so much more sense of the entire section, Genesis 1-3? I don't know. Go back, read Genesis 1-3. think of image as vocation of human beings to go and cultivate the created order, to govern it, and to govern each other in exactly the way that God has governed and created, and see if that makes sense of the whole story in a much more compelling, coherent way. And if it does, great. And if it doesn't, I did my best.